And there we are. Haven't done one of these solo intros by myself in a while, but this is Sales Chatter Live, the logistics podcast where we aim to help 10,000 reps hit a million GP in revenue and gross profit as well in less than 12 months. I'm your co-host, Ryan, aka the Logistics Monk, and today is Data Day, one of the days that we always look forward to, where we have the Principal Analyst at DAT Freight and Analytics, Dean Croke, and the Bodacious Cowboy, Jeff Dickinson, join us this morning to really talk shop about what's going on in the current freight market conditions. There's a lot going, so let's bring on our amazing guests and let's get started. So, all the way from New Jersey, I want to welcome Bodacious Cowboy. Good morning, brother. How you doing this morning?
Good morning, Ryan, man. Glad to be here as always.
There we go. So happy to have you on here. And then we have all the way, I think you're on the West Coast this morning. Yeah. West Side living. We got Dean Croke. How's it going on this morning, brother?
Yeah, good. I'm in Pacific time. So it's taken me all week to adjust. I'm out here in Lake Tahoe visiting kind of I'm not sure what the combination of work and vacation is, but if you put those two words together, that's what this week is.
Workation.
Bit of work, bit of vacation, visiting.
Yeah, there we go. You got to. Life is a balance, right? You got to have that balance. And Lake Tahoe. I know that you were there. You were there earlier this year as well, I think.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So we did the cross country drive. Brought my son out here to start his new job at Palisades Ski Resort. They had 700 inches of snow when just after we got here. It was the end of the season. Now it's all dry, and they've got bushfires. So it's just an amazing part of the world to see the change in scenery, but dry, like really, really dry. So it's fascinating. A lot of it's a big vacation resort here around Lake Tahoe. A lot of history, but beautiful.
I feel like that's a reoccurring theme, though. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention as well to the other news around the world too. Like in Canada, British Columbia, I'm gonna reach out to Damon to see if everything's going on there. Like wildfires are going like crazy. Even Yukon, which is one of the territories, which is really, you don't really hear news about the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, and none of it. Which are the three territories of Canada, they're having the same kind of thing as well. So I don't know. I read a report, gents. They said, what is it? It's not global warming anymore. It's like global, what do they call it? Like heating or something like that right now. But yeah, we can both attest to it. You know, it's really extremely hot. But you know what else is really hot? You know, the current freight market conditions. So Dean, let us know what have you been seeing this week and what's been going on?
Yeah, well, we had a great show yesterday on our DAT IQ show where we covered a lot of this. Of course, Jeff's going to be having it on today, right? Is today your show goes live? Some of the, we concur. It's interesting when you have a bunch of people on from different markets and different perspectives where they all sort of concur with the same economic outlook for the freight market. And I think when we talk about freight, I had someone ask me this the other day, and freight really is, it's not sand and gravel and concrete moving, within 100 miles. That's not what we're talking about. Freight is really, when you get over 250 miles and it's long distance stuff, you're really talking about freight. That market does not look good for the rest of the year. There aren't many demand signals. That won't be new news. Jeff's been an advocate of that theory for quite some time now. Shippers are really uncertain of what we look like as consumers, what we think. One thing I did hear the other day that was interesting, shippers are very reluctant to order up too much stuff because they don't want to get caught holding too much inventory. I think that's playing out in imports. So freight market volumes, if we sort of start with the big news, Yellow went out of business last week. And we did, and I used this in my update yesterday, uncharacteristically see an increase in freight volume last week in the dry van space. And I mean, this is one data point, but whenever I fly around the country, I always make a point of leaving the airport, driving past the air cargo facility to see whose line haul trucks are parked there. right? Because whenever you go to a FedEx or a UPS facility, you'll see large truckload carriers, vans backed up to the dock or sitting out in the parking lot waiting to preload those overflow LTL volumes late at night. And those loads hit the load board, and they're scrambling to find a truck to run that overflow freight. And in 2 airports I went through, I started to see what I hadn't seen before were more line haul trucks lined up at the dock. So we saw that in our volume. Again, it's a small data sample, but all of these things are part of a bigger jigsaw puzzle, the pieces that come together. We did see more freight volume come over last night. There were some trucks there that we know that was documented in the media where they were using line haul trucks to move LTL freight in point to point. So that's definitely happening. I don't know that that'll last that long, Jeff. I think that's more of a blip. I think some of that LTL volume will get absorbed back into their normal LTL. Sure. So that was a little bit of good news. But as for the rest of the market, spot rates continue to, I don't even know I can say dredge along the bottom anymore, because they continue to slide south. They're sliding along, they're drifting sideways. The market really lacks directions from a rate perspective. In respects, that's good news because they're not falling at a fairly good clip. The other good news, I think, that came out of our data last week was that the rate of decrease on the contract rate side has slowed considerably. And, normally they were decreasing every month at about double digits, 12 to 15% decrease in contract rates. That has slowed down to the 6 to 7% decrease range. For those listening, why do you care about contract rates? Well, contract rates are the majority of the freight. They will start to bottom out and start to climb when the market cycle turns, and they'll typically 4 to 6 month lag on spot rates. So spot rates are bottoming out, contract rates are starting to slow down. Still got a lot of carriers in the market, still got too many trucks for loads. That has always been the case. I think that's still the case even in the contract market. But the exodus of carriers, and this is something we'll talk a lot about on our show next week and the week after, in particular the first week after the end of August, because that's when August's voluntary revocations will be in. And that is the number of carriers that voluntarily left the industry because diesel went up, and that's the bigger news. Diesel went up 47 cents a gallon in the last 5 weeks. It was up 11 cents last week, 22 cents the week before. When the retail market starts to pick that up at the pump, it'll stay that way for a long period of time, because if you notice, diesel is fast to go up but very slow to come down. And that means that high diesel prices will affect truckload carriers, in particular spot market carriers who are long haul that burn a lot of diesel. And one of the things we talked about yesterday, someone said, well, where does diesel have to get to before it really starts to hurt? I took a swag at about $4.50 a gallon, because at $4.50 a gallon for a long haul carrier, you are losing around 2 cents a mile. But more importantly, it's so much. What it means is your cash outflow, you can't keep up with it from your earnings. So it becomes a cash flow problem. You start to run negative cash flow really quickly because you're dropping, $1,500 in your tanks every 3 days. That cash flow starts to hurt. And that's what really hurts a lot of carriers that are struggling to earn enough revenue to pay their monthly fuel bill. So we're about to see, I fear, another exodus of carriers. So if you're buying capacity, why would that matter? It means you're going to have fewer trucks available to meet those, capacity commitments with your shippers. And we've been saying that for a while, right? When the market turns, there'll be fewer trucks. And Jeff, Ryan, you'll love this. I was at a big brokerage this week, and I was fascinated to hear. So it's a really big brokerage, and they were talking about, look after your capacity, respect your capacity, because these guys you need these guys to move the freight when it gets busy.
Yes.
So it was interesting when they were talking about, they were echoing the same things that you've been talking about in terms of your coaching of prospective sales folks, is how to build relationships and think about the next market cycle. So that's where we're at. We're at the bottom of the freight market. It's still no sign of it turning. There's not a lot of demand indicators, and capacity is still leaking out of the industry. Imports are in, and we can talk about that in a minute, but imports are in. And I've sent Ryan a picture that we'll throw up soon. But that's where we're at in terms of the freight market. Not all good news. I'm never really a pessimist on any of our shows. I'm always pretty upbeat, but I have a sick feeling in my stomach about what's going on right now because of this hike in diesel, because the spike in diesel prices was our worst case pessimistic forecast scenario. in the summer. And here we are. And a lot of it's got to do with global demand.
That's crazy. Like we were talking off air, Jeff, you can attest to this too. Like we were comparing diesel prices here in Canada. Like our regular prices are coming close to about $6 to $7 a gallon, right? Like it's $1.66 a liter down here. Jeff, based on what Dean just really said, what sticks out to you?
That we're in deep trouble, and I think that if the fuel goes up 25 more cents per gallon, it's going to be, I hate to say it, a bloodbath, man, because these guys are going to exit real fast.
Right.
They're not going to be able to hold ground on stuff like that. I mean, when you've got suppressed spot rates, the contracts aren't going up anywhere. They're still hovering around the same spot rates that you're seeing out there. And now you tag on another 25 cents per gallon on top of that, they're going to be gone. They're going to be gone just like that. And it's going to affect the more of the mom and pop kind of small 2-3 truck organization, not really going to affect the big hitters that much. And the market is going to shift greatly. I mean, greatly when that happens. And we're not too far off from that happening if it keeps on going. 22 cents one week, 11 cents another week. What is it going to be? What is it going to be now? You know, next Tuesday when the EIE comes out with their statistics on fuel, you know.
So operating costs, it's 65 cents a mile, Jeff. That's what diesel is today. The national average is 65 cents a mile. I mean, that's that. If I do my calculations right, that's 36% of your operating costs. That's a
huge.
It's
and
just
you
huge.
got to be at 25%, Dean. You know that to be profitable.
Yeah, right.
You know,
it's
Well, Stacey has a question here that I want to get both of your takes on here, which I think is then I got this question too, but I've got a question as well. You know, and Stacey asked here, do you think that we'll see some larger carriers take advantage of by some small carriers? But the question that I had for you, gents, is like, I believe it's kind of like energy, right? You can never kill energy. It's always transferred, right? So my question to both of you guys, if we do have an exodus of all these carriers leaving, where do they go? What's the next booming industry that you guys can, and maybe we don't have a crystal ball, right? But do you guys, what do usually truck drivers get into? You know, like do they go into a completely different line of business, or do they go into consulting? What do you guys seen that exodus moving that energy towards?
Do you want me to have a crack at this, Jeff?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's a great question from Stacey. The larger carriers will buy up smaller carriers where they have a strategic fit for their lane density. So some of the large fleets buy a carrier because they've got a lot of freight volume out of a particular area, and the larger truckload carriers has a deficit in that area. So the acquisition is strategic. It helps them balance their volume. It brings more volume in, but it helps get their revenue per loaded week or revenue per truck week up because they got more freight to run on each lane. That's the reason. The smaller guys, highly unlikely that a large fleet would buy an owner operator or someone 3 or 4 trucks. So those guys go out of the business. There's no question. I'm looking at the auction numbers right now at some of the big auction houses for Class 8 trucks. They're at 2019 levels, which was a terrible year for capacity. So that's what will happen, Stacey, is they will just get out of the industry. Where do they go? A lot of the owner operators that have their own authority will seek the shelter of a large truckload carrier and lease on to that carrier. They'll go and work for a Landstar or a Werner. So right now the numbers are in their favor to go and work for, and I'll use Werner, right? So if you're out there on your own right now and you're running for $2 a mile, you're getting $2 a mile to haul freight, and it costs you $1.80 a mile to run your truck. You're probably losing money in the long run. You're certainly not making a profit. If you go and sell your trailer or just park your trailer, you can haul for Werner, haul one of their trailers for $1.75 a mile. Right, so you're essentially a company truck. They load you, they dispatch you, you buy fuel on their discount program, you use their maintenance facilities. So that's a very good deal at $1.75 a mile for power only. The break-even point to run your own trailer is 50 cents a mile above $1.75. So if I want to get my own authority and go back the other way, which is what they did in June of 2020. $1.75 plus 50. I need 50 cents to run my own trailer on authority, right, to be profitable. That's $2.25. So when the spot market gets to $2.25, that will be when carriers leave the shelter of leased on to Werner to go back to running their own authority. It's $2.25, but it's 50 cents above where they're getting money right now. So right now, if you are in the spot market, you're losing money compared to working for Werner hauling their trailers. And that's where they go. Some just get out of the industry completely and sell their trucks at auction, but that's where they go. The other thing though, Ryan, construction industry, massive shortage of workers in the construction industry. It's generally a safe haven. The skills aren't automatically transferable. A lot of people say, well, truck drivers just go and work in the construction industry. If you've worked in the construction industry, there's not a lot of similarities between the two. It is hard physical work in the construction industry. Pays well. There is a shortage. So yes, there is opportunity, but there are other opportunities for truck drivers out there, including the construction industry. But a lot of guys and girls, it's everybody, they will get out of driving a truck and go and drive a truck for someone else if they don't want to continue their own truck in a leased on capacity. I have a lot of my friends that I've been tracking in Boston that were out in the spot market, ran their own truck. Darby Pedro was one. He was just in the Washington Post article that was out 2 weeks ago. He was featured in it. And he's now driving a triaxle dump truck around Boston for $45 an hour. Like there's a lot of people out there that are looking for drivers to haul, freight around locally for $45 an hour. It's a really good job, but it's hard to find workers.
Yeah.
Is one of your friends, Dean, if I remember correctly, we're going back several months, you said that he parked some of his power units and trailers. He's still parked, right?
Yep. Well, the trailers, yes, because the rates, So he's gone back to leased on.
Okay.
So he was typical of a lot of carriers during the pandemic when they were making $1 per mile, profit above operating costs. They were paying down debt on all of their equipment, so they could afford to park equipment. And when the market turned, they had the luxury of just parking. Jeff, this is a really good question. One of the things I've been saying for a long time is, that period from June of 2020 to the end of 2021 was the most profitable period in truckload. When I say history, since deregulation, I think that's a fair statement. What that did is that gave carriers what I'll call a runway. They had a lot of cash, a lot of reserves, and they had a runway to absorb all of the high diesel costs of last year. My fear is that we're at the end of that runway.
They're running out of cash.
Yeah, I think we're at a point now where that economic boom from during the pandemic, we've probably used up all of our, chips there, and we're at a point where we can no longer support this. So I think that's where we're at. I hate to be a doom and gloom type person, but I fear that's where this market's at. What does it mean for everybody listening? It means this market's going to turn on a dime.
Yep.
And I think I'll make two predictions. I think there's a lot of cheap contract freight out there that's going to get rejected and fall through routing guides. Yep. It's going to hit the spot market, and because we've got fewer trucks, it's going to be really hard to move it. And it'll be hard to move it. I think rates will start to turn quickly. That could be a good case scenario for shippers, bad case scenario for shippers who are struggling to move that volume in what could be a busier season, not peak, but we're coming into a time of the year where a lot more freight moves than it does over the summer.
Yeah, I want to touch on that a little bit, Dean, that you said that, because I've done quite a number. This is the year that I've done quite a bit of RFPs, and when I get that feedback, in full transparency, like with new people, I just don't win. And for anybody who's out there, really question why you're doing an RFP. But anyways, when I get to these rates and I hear the actual numbers that they're locking carriers into, I'm like, these are paperweights. And there's so much that you guys are talking about. Like a lot of these kickoff calls that we have, Dean, they'll say like, hey, no paperweights, we need somebody to be reliable, all this stuff. And it's just like, if ABC Trucking is going for 70 cents a mile, and you're awarding them that freight, you're setting yourself up for disaster. I just don't understand it. And Dean, another point about like looking for work, Caravana was in Toronto this past weekend, which is one of the big West Indian festivals. Shout out to Speedy Transport. They had like 4 or 5 trucks during the whole parade, which looked amazing. But anyways, from going to one of the fetes or parties that we went to, we took an Uber. And we actually had the driver actually was a truck driver who's been doing long haul. And he's now telling me that, I'm doing gig work now. just to kind of manage, like I've given up my truck, but like I'm doing the gig, I'm doing the Uber. He's like, and he doesn't know what he's doing. He has like 2 or 3 phones. He's like, either it's skip the dishes, Uber Eats, Uber, whatever it takes. And, it's getting to a point where that's going to get overdone with, right? Because everyone's signing up for something like that. But, I love that you're saying like, the construction industry, there's places for people to go or go work for a bigger guy. Jeff, have you ever seen, Jeff, this question's for you. Have you seen something like this in your extensive history of working in logistics? And if you have, what was kind of like the result? Is everything does the scale always balance at the end of the day, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I'm coming from a shipper's point of view, right? An RFP right now is totally ridiculous because it's unsustainable. It's just unsustainable. It's a bad time to do it. And to go back to what you said, with the brokers and stuff, it's going to put them in a bad position. No, it's going to put the shippers in a bad position, but they don't realize it because they're going for the cheap rates. They're squeezing out their corral. There's no loyalty with their carriers. Their carriers are going to tell them to go pound salt when the market changes, because they're going to come back like lions and they're going to be eating like they're going to want a lot of money, and they're going to remember you screwed them. You got to look at the long term. This year is gone. And I said this, Dean, it. This year is just, don't plan on this year at all. Look for the future. Look for 2024. Set yourself up now for next year. Get those carriers, get that loyalty, build those relationships. Build those relationships with the shippers as well, because those are going to be the most important things that you can do right now to set up for a profitable, successful 2024. But you don't realize it right now because it's a bear market and everybody is losing and you feel pressed. So, I've seen this before, but not as bad. Maybe 2019, but not as bad as it is. And we spoke about this for months, Dean, and we were looking at 4th of July, and that would be the tail of the tape. And where's it going to go? It's either going to go up or it's going to go down. I said I believe it's going to go below 2019 because it looks like it was going to follow that trend.
Very close.
Lo and behold, it is going there, and there's no peak season. It's done. It's done. So it's a scary time. It's a scary time, man.
I love the corral reference from the Bodacious Cowboy. You need that. That didn't go. I didn't miss that one. But you're right.
But it is. It is.
You're right.
That's what shippers really have to think about. Don't think about cheap. I understand. I've been in that position. Yeah. Your hierarchies are putting a lot of pressure on you to bring more money back to the bottom line. Save on transportation. Save. But sometimes you have to press back. You have to have that conversation with the CFO, your president, whatever. Do you realize what you're trying to tell me to do and how it's going to affect you in the long run? This is the bad choice. Here's the reason why. And you better have those answers to his questions. You have to prove it. And you got to use that data. Take the emotional aspect out of the equation and use the data to speak for itself. It speaks volumes, but know what you're reading.
Jeff, you mentioned, and I know a lot of people think about this, but you mentioned, forget 2023, think about 2024. I don't know that a lot of people think that long term about this. I suspect a lot of people are thinking about making their margins this month, making their targets this month.
Well, and I want to be the devil's advocate with that, gents, because when you look at like most people, they're not like us. We're like agents where we're a business within a business, right? So a lot of these reps, they have to go month by month because they're on the chopping block. Like they've got, just like Jeff was talking about, your shippers, they've got a hierarchy. Same thing with sales reps, especially if you're a salaried sales rep. Especially when you're talking about projections, right? There's a reason why we have this show and we give the data and we give all that information. But those who are nearsighted and they went to January saying, 2023 is going to be my year. So as I don't know with everybody here, just with projections, we obviously increase them month over month, right? If you say for brand new, hey, I'll make 5,000 KGP this month, then I'll go to 7, then I'll go to 10. So you're looking at August. They're probably at 70 or 80% that they said they're going to hit, and they're probably only capitalizing on 10% of that, right? So you got that scared thing, and I read something, gents, that really led forward with me, Dean, was that good freight or good carriers, they don't hit the load boards. Like it's very rare for like my stuff. My stuff doesn't touch load boards. Jeff is exactly the same. He's a phone call away, right? So we have to understand that as well. Like build those relationships so that and don't just build relationships with one carrier or one lane. Have 2 or 3. Have some backups because you're gonna find these blips. People are gonna get up and leave. I'll never forget COVID, where I had people that I was emailing, calling all the time, never picked up once, didn't acknowledge anything.
Right,
calling me saying, "Hey Ryan, we have you on file. Can you quote this for us?" I'm like, What?
But here's the catch, right? A lot of load board freight is filler freight. Like it fills in a gap in your network, so it's strategic.
It's transitional.
Yeah, transactional. So, but when you need it, you need good people, right? I think it's a really good balancing act. You've got to have some people you've got to have on tap. It's a bit like baseball, right? You need people. I'll use the Red Sox, right? They have the Pawtucket, team that they'll call up a pitcher from the AAA league. So you got to have a bench. You've got to have a backup league that you can pull players from. You've got to keep them engaged. So I think the carrier management must be a really difficult thing in that market, Ryan, because when they're trying to make their margins here in August, that means margin expansion, which means buying capacity at a cheaper rate, which means screwing down the carrier on that bid. That's what that translates to, right? And I get that. I understand that completely. But for a carrier in the spot market, it might be okay to take $1.50 because I've got $4 a mile coming out of the other area. And I think that's the point. When I talk to brokers, I don't understand their world completely, but they think transactionally one load at a time. That's not how carriers are thinking. They're thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead. Yeah. So sometimes that low bid actually works, but that's where you've got to have a network of carriers that that can fill the gaps in your network when you have that load come in. It's a really challenging business because my question to you, Ryan, is do new people that come into the industry have a mission to build a network of carriers, or is it just when I need someone, I'll make a call to anybody?
Yeah. So I've been at 3 places in my career, Dean, and I would assume it's the same exact thing everywhere. Just based on that, we're not really kind of trained to build a network of carriers. We're kind of built to like prospect. So we're prospecting for customers. They'll give us a lane, and it's like, okay, post it on the load boards and see what you kind of get. Right. And it's just like, and that's where we kind of go back and forth. There's amazing places like, like Scott Watanabe at Armstrong, but those are very rare to me that I see. So they're really coming here with a sales, not operations, sales mindset. To basically get numbers on the board. So, hey, if you switch from that cradle to the grave, like if you think about that, who did we have? Yesterday we had Teresa. She's a business development rep. She does containers at Alliance Logistics, I believe it is. And she was saying when she switched her mindset from being a sales / operations focused rather than just being sales, because sales is sales at the end of the day, but being that relationship base, that's when her life kind of changed with like different carriers. But to answer your question, Dean, and correct me if I'm wrong in the audience and Jeff as well, but we're never told to build that because we're supposed to bring in that lead and then pass it over to operations. So operations really should be building that network for you, or your collaboration, unless you're cradle to the grave. So
that's interesting. So what if I'm a carrier, right? This might help in the building of that network. If I'm a carrier, most carriers run dedicated lanes. Even if they're an owner operator, they live somewhere and they're trying to get home and they have a lane. Like you're talking about the Freight Sensei, right? He's got a particular lane he runs. Yep. There'd be 1,000 carriers that want to run that lane every single week. Question is, how do you find them?
Yes.
And they're out there because if I'm a carrier, I'm looking for someone that has freight on that lane every week, even if it's 1 load a week. That's my mission. Because the reality in the spot market world is, we see 2.5 million loads, dry van loads a week without any doubt. There's a lot of freight that falls out of the routing guides into the freight market. But what I'm looking for that dedicated carrier that wants to run on that lane and here's what a lot of people think, even within DAT, a lot of people think carriers just run one-way, sort of a one-way network, A to B to C to D to E, and it's all spot market. No, the majority of small fleets are running from their hometown where there's a contract outbound and the spot market fills in the way back. Even massive fleets. I know a very large fleet friend of mine runs from Boston out to El Dorado every week, and they paid round trip miles, but he goes to the spot market to haul freight, in inverted commas, back home because he's already paid for the backhaul. but he picks up freight as extra profit. So he's that methodology drives the rate down.
Right.
Because he could move that freight for $1 a mile. He'd be someone I'd want in my network if I was a broker. I'd want to know about him.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, that was my first customer, gents. My first customer, they were a wood customer, they were a timber customer, and the carriers that I had on there, we were going up to Sault Ste. Marie. Anybody in Canada, you'll know there's only really 2 companies in Sault Ste. Marie, so you know what company I'm talking about. But he was getting like $7-8 a mile to bring back steel. So he would be willing to take my $2-3 a mile load of timber there because it would be really good to come back.
That's the network building. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think a lot.
Go ahead, Dean.
No, go ahead. No, right.
No. I have a different way of approaching carriers. When I go to carrier and I tell them the lane, I go, well, how much can you do it for? I put it on there. I'm not going to give him the rate because he's the one that has to be happy with the rate that he can do it for, and they usually come back and they go, you know what? I can do it for $1,200. And I basically say, well, does that work? Or are you just trying to get the business? What are you trying to, accomplish here?
Yeah.
No. This is what I can do with it because to your point, I've got outbound coming out of whatever, and it's like, okay, I'm not going to dictate the rate because if they're happy with it, I'm happy with it. And the shipper's happy. Everybody's happy. Right. Yeah. But if you're pressing him and going, well, can you go down to, I know you got 1,200, but can you do 9?
Yeah.
Right.
It's all I got in it. It's all I got. That's the number one operations line.
You got the lane, something like that. But I mean, and then on the backside of that, and I firmly believe in it, when a carrier commits to it, carriers fire themselves. I don't care. I don't fire carriers,
exactly
what they said. They told me, I didn't tell them. So if you're willing to do it and you can do the on time and everything, if you have poor performance, don't blame me. You have all the tools and everything I gave you. Blame yourself why you lost the business. I mean, that's the way you have to go about it in building these relationships and talk about it.
Jeff, this is a topic on our DAT IQ show. We have to get you on to talk about how carriers fire themselves. I think that could be a very interesting
topic.
Gonna
get trolls, man. That's gonna be to monitor the chat.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and especially cheapest rates don't always win the bid, and especially when you're doing RFPs, you should have a primary, secondary, tertiary in case that primary falls off. You have your backup. We just talked about the backups, and you gotta feed these guys throughout the whole year, because when you get pressed and you need something to move, guess what the carrier's going to go? Well, what have you done for me lately?
Yeah.
Relationships.
If you fed them, then they'll jump on the horse and go for the ride with you, But otherwise, they're gonna remember what you did. Did you feed them all year round, or did you only call them in a pinch?
Yeah,
you can't do that.
I can assure everybody listening that carriers think about this all day. They think about, how can I get freight back? Or if I'm doing a spot market load, how can I get this load as my own?
Yes.
Like every single carrier that goes in with a spot load, I can tell you, they go into a shipper, they are sniffing around to say, how can I get this freight for me? Yep. So there's all the way down the highways, they're always thinking about, how can I find a load to come back?
They're looking for continuous moves.
Right.
That's what
they wanted to. So here's the thing, guys. They want it to be auto tender. So the carriers that I've kind of had and the freight that I have is like, hey, I get my POs on Friday. They're auto tendered on Friday. The next week is booked. And I remember when I used to do produce, and produce is very daily to me, at least very daily, especially if you're working with some of these peppers and things like that. You do have to be on a daily, and you're only as good as your last load. So don't assume that they're going to send you loads. You got to actually work for it.
Right.
So there'll be times that, hey, I call these guys and call carriers, and so Dean, just so you kind of know like the mindset of what we kind of do. So the fine carriers, when I would go on LoadLink, which is our Canadian side, we post the lane. So let's say Toronto to Montreal. That's a very common one. You'll see all the trucks posting there, and then literally we were told to just call each one and then click off. There's one like a blue icon that turns red. So that means you've called them, and then everybody will kind of go, hey, how often are you out there? When are you there? And things like that. But coming back to what we're talking about, when we're able to actually make those calls and talk to these people and say, okay, are you there all the time? No?
Right.
Okay.
No.
Do you know anybody who's going to be all the time?
Right.
Because these guys
Right.
just want to be auto tender, just like me.
Right.
Like, how nice
Yep.
is it, Jeff? You do the exact same thing. Like, you
Right.
come into the office, auto tender your loads, you made
That's
your
it.
profit, and you just go like, all right, time for another bodacious
So
cowboy show.
That's
You know?
what I
So
do.
it's the
I mean,
exceptions, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I do. I mean, all of my loads I book out 3, 4, 5 weeks in advance. I mean,
Yep.
because it's all
Right.
dedicated. That's why I don't
Right.
do. I'm
Yeah.
not a transactional broker or LSP.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you have more control. You have less risk for
Yep.
sure because the
Hmm.
drivers get to
Hmm.
know the run, the shipper, the dock supervisor, etc., and they look forward to seeing each other. You know, and they
Yes.
buy them
Hmm.
coffee. They do all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Those are the solid relationships that you need to build, and that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Build it today for next year. You know,
Right.
the margins, don't worry about that. You know, if you do things right, those will all come next year. You can make a bundle if you want to go on the transactional side of it and just do a killing if that's
Right.
what you want to do. But if you're looking for the long haul and having continuous moves and continuous business and not working so hard and working smarter, those are the type of things that you need to do. I mean, that's
Well,
the way to
Jeff,
go.
you talk about that, right? Start for next year, and you're talking preaching about that. When do we start thinking about next year? For me,
Now.
personally, no, I'm just thinking like you're talking now, right? So you're getting ahead of the curve. But like other people, when they're kind of thinking about, they're like, okay, well, after Thanksgiving, you know, because you look into that November, December, that lull, or like, okay, well, let's start planning for 2024. So if you start planning now, you're getting like 2-3 months ahead of most people out there, anyways.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So
Yes.
it's
I
all,
mean,
it's all about,
you talk about, you know, setting your own personal goals and objectives, whether it's a corporate or yourself and you own your own business. You know, you have to start writing all these things down. You know, what's
Yeah.
working, what's not working, what can I change? You know, that may not work now, but it's going to work for next year because the market's going to change. And when it does, what am I going to do and how am I going to
Right.
scale? How am I going to scale? How am I going to be? Am I going to be in the position that I need to be very successful? That's what you have to think about right now.
You do. And I think that's so important. But, you know, the one thing that I'm currently seeing like everywhere in stores right now is, you know, Dean, we're seeing everybody like gear up for Halloween and fall gear and everything like that in retail stores. What is the imports? What are we looking at for there? Because that stuff would have landed 6 months ago into here. And then that's why we're seeing all those like pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns and all those costumes already.
It seems earlier. I saw back to school. I mean, it's only a month away, so I can see why people are thinking about it now. But July imports came out yesterday on our IHS market peers data set that we get in. They've just certified all the bills of lading through the Customs Border Patrol process. Couple of headlines. West Coast containerized imports are at 2019 levels. East Coast, though, are 17% above 2019 levels. And on the chart, you can see there is the orange line there in the center. Is 2023. You can see where we're sitting there. We're a long way south of where we were in the red and blue, which was 2021, 2022, certainly outliers in terms of imports. But we're back to where you would normally expect the market. Volumes are down 8% year over year, but up 5% month over month. I'm going to go out on a peer here and say that at 2.3 million TEU imports, we may have just seen peak season. I suspect we're not going to go much more than 2.3 million. Volumes in August may be around this, but I think this is it. And that, Jeff, is what we've seen in prior years. So so there's been that's good news that imports are coming in. I think this is a lot of people pulling in that volume a little bit earlier and making up for some of the losses that they've had in previous year in terms of sales, trying to get ahead of the sales. Year over year, East Coast volumes down 4% compared to this time last year. So that's interesting. But West Coast is down 14% year over year. So volume, and one of the reasons, of course, is West Coast has a disproportionate amount of imports from China. A lot of those imports are decreasing. Gulf Coast imports are up 11% month over month, only down 2% year over year. So we've obviously seen a lot more imports come into the Gulf Coast over the course of the last year. Los Angeles was ranked number 2 in the month of July. New York, surprisingly, took the top spot. In New York, New York's the number one port. I think for probably 3 or 4 months, Los Angeles has been the number one port, with LA number 2, and then Long Beach, and then followed by Savannah number 4. New York is up 13% month over month, down 23% year over year. All top 10 commodities except wine had positive month over volume. New York furniture up 7% month over month. So yeah, lots of good things happening on the East Coast. I'm not surprised at that though. I think this may be a stretch. I don't know that this is the exact reason, but you've been hearing about the drought in the Panama Canal in the lake system there. This week they had to offload 1,400 containers off the Ever Max, I think it was, and put it on the rail. It's a 17,400 TEU vessel, but the extra 1,400 containers meant that it couldn't get through the lock, so they had to offload them because of low water levels. That is freight that normally comes from Asia through the Panama Canal to the Gulf and East Coast. I suspect, and I don't have data to back into this really quickly, but I suspect there's more freight coming from Asia via the Suez Canal direct to the East Coast. That's why you're seeing increased volumes there. I'll have to do some more research on that to confirm that's the case. But the low water levels and the drought conditions in the Panama Canal is not a new story. So that means that I suspect shippers have been changing their routings for months ago to cater for this. So that's the imports that have come out. We'll be writing about this next week. I think you'll probably see a lot more stories about it, but that's where we sit. My prediction is that we've just seen peak season and August will start to fall off. That could be if the forecasters' theory that importers and wholesalers are reluctant to order too much because they don't want to get caught with excess inventories again, right? Because their holding costs are very high. That would mean that we've just seen July as the peak season, and August, September should start to taper off. As you can see from that chart that we had there, and sorry to be a pain, Ryan, but you can see how peak season comes along in those years and then kind of falls away. Right. Normally it peaks around now. The green line is sort of the outlier there. In what year was that? Was 2020. Of course, it's an outlier. But as you can see here, July numbers from August, it tended to tail off in those other years. Even it tailed off in 2022. It sort of peaked a little bit later in August and then fell away. But we're certainly around the peak season in terms of imports. I think we've just seen it.
Yeah, you know what the tail of the tape is going to be, Dean? And I mean, some may think this is funny, but Home Depot, will their Christmas displays come out prior to October? I mean, seriously, I mean, I remember seeing, Christmas decorations, like the first week in October. Will they come out in September? Right. And if they do, the push is there to get rid of that inventory.
And of course, Christmas decorations could go year to year to year. They don't change much.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Right. It's a whole new meaning to Christmas in July, right? I mean,
yeah, we had a couple of those sales too. And, it's funny that you guys said that, because when I'm looking at our stores and it's all Halloween, back to school and all that stuff. And, Dean, you were talking about furniture, like, that those imports. I'm looking at outdoor furniture just being like clearance to everything. I went to our local Walmart on the weekend and like everything is so dirt cheap, grills, all that stuff. And you're so right with Jeff, what you said, like that stuff doesn't change year over year. Same thing with patio furniture and like grills. Like Walmart's been selling the same grills like forever. Like I bought the same grill 4 years ago and it's the exact same thing. That nothing has kind of changed.
Maybe a different paint scheme.
Yeah,
the same grill.
even if that, right? Like they slap on something like there. But gents, we're preparing people. We're talking about, getting ready for 2024. But, when we're looking at something like, I believe we're, like you saw, talking about the dog days of summer, we're getting into hurricane season, which I believe will be a huge impact. Jeff, what are you guys kind of seeing with that? What can we prepare sales professionals with that information?
I think it's going to be gosh, Jeff, we've talked about this sort of offline. This is part of my pessimistic worst case scenario. Every little piece of the jigsaw makes a picture, right? So eventually you get a picture. And I read stories and I kind of think, that's another piece of the puzzle. When I read stories about boiling water temperatures in the Gulf and the Atlantic, and then I see dust storms and dry weather in Northern Africa that's sort of putting a lid on the Atlantic hurricane season, because Northern Africa dictates a lot of what we see across the Atlantic. We're in the middle of hurricane season. We haven't seen anything yet. We've seen a few storms develop and get to high probability, haven't really eventuated. They've predicted a normal season, which means 3 to 4 hurricanes making landfall of a fairly, this is NOAA. If you've got hot water temperatures, and then you've got, I think 47% of our refineries are located along the Gulf Coast. It's not called, the I-10 through there is not called Gasoline Alley for any other reason other than a lot of refineries are there. Even one of the reasons cited for the spike in diesel prices was the excessive heat in July, because when it gets really, really hot down there, it slows down the refineries. Yes. They have to cut back production. So here's sort of where I'm sitting here. We've got sort of the dog days of summer. Freight demand is pretty tepid. My mind goes straight back to the 2 Cat 5 hurricanes in 2017 that kickstarted. And I was working at FreightWaves at the time and looking at flatbed data, and I just started there. And I remember seeing the flatbed tender data start to go haywire after the 2 Cat 5 hurricanes. And what it meant was there was a massive rebuilding effort underway in the last quarter of flatbed in particular. And then, of course, we went into 2018 and we had the changes in the tax code, industrial economic stimulus on the government side. We had an oil price rally. And 2018 really kickstarted that freight market, but it was primarily a flatbed-driven rate rally that started in the hurricane season of 2017. I suspect we could see the same thing again in flatbed, because it is so I guess my point was, if the waters are hot, and we saw it last year, those hurricanes, they love hot water, warm water. They intensified very, very quickly along the Gulf. That's my fear, is that this turns out to be, we don't see a lot of events, but the ones we do, like last year, Hurricane Ian was a bad one. We didn't have a lot, but the ones we did were very, very costly.
Hey, listen, we're not saying we're not hoping for this, because it does change the market. I really hope it doesn't happen, but it just seems like it's the perfect storm brewing out there, and we're trying to prepare you for this. I mean, you got the flatbed business, which is down in the dumps. This could be the turning point. If instead of 3, we have 5, 6, 7 of them, it will turn it
worst case
like that. And we hope it doesn't happen.
Well, we do, but the probability is sort of there, isn't it, Jeff? I think everybody goes through the hurricane preparedness when you live down there. There's the standard things you do. NOAA are pretty good about it, but so are FEMA. They do their best efforts to, prepare everyone for it. Yeah, it's the inevitability. Let's hope it doesn't happen. But that's one of the things that I'm sort of watching for is if you're thinking about capacity, that's one of the things that really does affect capacity, whether it be a water flooding event. Trucks can't get in or out. If it's a wind event, you can get in reasonably quickly, but it's a lot more rebuilding effort because of the damage wind does as opposed to flooding.
True.
So it's going to one last point that I was kind of reading in preparation for this. AccuWeather said like in March that they were preparing for 11 to 15 storms, events to happen, and now they just updated their report, but they're saying actually 15 to 25. Right.
Wow.
So it could be, for them to kind of say that. I know some family who lives out there as well, and they get prepared anyways, right? You have to. I feel like you have to. It's something that you definitely have to do. But
I don't know if you can prepare for 25 of these suckers.
You got to.
I mean, it just takes one, and that it's not going to be one bad one. It's going to be a few really bad ones. Especially with hot water like that, and something that may be a Cat 2, Cat 3, maybe a 4 could easily go into a 5 multiple times, which is
the other. I mean, the reason I've been watching it, I was watching it in the context of diesel prices, because it doesn't take a whole lot to disrupt the production of diesel and gasoline, right? So it doesn't have to be a hurricane. There could be all sorts of events like we've just seen, but high temperatures impact them. You get damage to equipment when they start to run hot. Heat presents a risk to equipment damage, which slows down outputs. But we've got so many things going on right now, and because of the fact that so much of our energy production is tied to the Gulf Coast, anything down there is going to have a material impact on diesel prices, which is, aside from the hurricanes, if the hurricanes come along, then that will impact production and drive prices for diesel even higher, I suspect. That's what I'm
look
watching.
what happened to BP, right, in the Gulf of New Orleans. out
Yep.
there, you know, when pipe got severed, look what happened during that time. I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking Cat 5 hitting those, you know, those platforms that could easily loosen up one of those. That's all it takes. That's all
Yeah.
it takes. And we're in deep
The
trouble.
levee breaks, baby.
That's
Yeah,
right.
this kind of happens. But you know, a lot of information was said here today, guys, and I couldn't thank you both enough for joining us here on Sales Chatter Live. Before we kind of let go and go off into our days, Dean, can you let us know what's kind of going on basically with that IQ Live, what you kind of got going on, and we'll get over to Jeff.
DATIQ Live, 10 a.m. Eastern. Next week, we've got a really interesting guest on. Jeff, you're going to love this. So I've got Ibrahim Bayan from Nuveen. He's been on our show before. He's the ex-chief economist at Freightways. Him and I worked together there for many years.
Nice.
He's probably one of the best freight market economists going, him and Anthony Smith. He's on our show next week. My question to him is, has the commercial warehousing market bubble burst? Because he's been tracking the rate of commercial warehouse development. We've theorized about it. What fills these warehouses if all of the inventory is now starting to get whittled down? Do we see, like JB Hunt reporting, a lot of empty 53-foot containers sitting around? Do we start to see a lot of empty 53-foot dry van trailers just sitting around because there's no freight to move because we ordered so many of them in the last couple of years? Commercial warehousing is one that I'm watching very carefully because it's driven the construction boom that we've been, you know, the commercial construction industry has been booming because of the need for warehousing. There's some theories that it'll stick, that there will be plenty of volume for these warehouses as they've moved freight closer to big populations. So Ryan, that's next week's show. That's going to be a really good one with Ibrahim on.
I can't wait. I can't wait, everybody.
Yeah, you know what? I hope that you touch base with Houston. I want to see what he has to say about what we've been saying for several months. About how they're building up the Houston, Dallas area, especially on 35. Huge.
Yep. Right up to all the way up to Fort Worth. Yep.
Got it.
That's awesome to kind of see. So we can't wait to tune into that. Cowboy, what's going on in your world, my friend?
Yeah, well, this afternoon, I got the first episode 1 of the Table Club. It's going to be great. Dean, friend's going to be joining me with Jason Miller, as well as Ari Ash. That's going to launch at 2:30 this afternoon. Then next week on the Storytelling Chronicles, I have Tyson Goman, VP of Business Development of Siphon Logistics, going to be joining me. So follow, like, share. We'd love to see you there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It'd be
so
great.
Can't thank you both, and can't thank our audience, for joining us to get all this information and send to your customers today. I got some tidbits that I'm going to be reaching out to some prospects and some shippers that I kind of use right now, and let them know, let them make sure that they're ready for 2024. So with that being said, this is Sales Chatter Live. We'll see everybody tomorrow back at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. If you found value in this, which I know you did, please like, comment, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our website, to everything that you can kind of see Sales Chatter Live on. And like we said, gents, thank you again for being a part of this amazing show with us. We'll see you guys all next Wednesday. Take care.
Have a great day, guys.
Okay. Bye, everyone.